Okay. Good Monday afternoon, November 7th. Sermon number 11. Almost 2 months now. Oh, more than 2 months. Oh, we took a week off. So, almost 2 months. Thank you, everybody, for continuing to watch. This week, we're going to do pride. And I did this because some things going on in my personal life that I've really been looking at this since Saturday. And really looking in on myself and how I behave and how I do things. And we'll just go from there. The Greek meaning is excessive shining, which carries its own self-destructive vanity, swollen estimate of own powers. Mark chapter 7, number 21 through 23 says, "For from within, out of the heart come evil thoughts, sexual immorality, theft, murder, adultery, coveting, wickedness, deceit, envy, slander, pride. All these things come from within and they defile a person." Now, I'm not speaking of pride as, oh, I did a good job, or, I did this well. And that's not what I'm speaking about. I'm speaking of destructive pride. And I feel that destructive pride is I do no wrong. I do nothing wrong. It's not my fault. I didn't do that. And it's all someone else's fault. And, there was a time in my life before I accepted the Lord that I blamed everybody for everything else. Everything that was going wrong, it was somebody else's fault. I didn't do it. I didn't do anything wrong. You need to understand me because of, my childhood and what my father did to me and blah, 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 blah. But that's not right. And, I'm not saying I'm perfect and I make mistakes, but, you can look at this in several different ways. I can look in my past marriages and stuff that, I was so prideful that none of it was my fault. I didn't do anything wrong. But I look at it differently now, especially after this study, that I do things wrong. I do make mistakes. I'm living in the flesh. I'm in the fleshly world, and I make mistakes. But it doesn't mean just because somebody calls you out on something doesn't mean we have to get rude and nasty about it. And a pastor in my home church this weekend gave an awesome sermon talking about that. That, just because I correct you or I do something, I'm doing it out of love. I'm not doing it because I want to point the finger at you and say you're all to blame for it. That's not what it's about. And that's where the pride gets in the middle of it, because that pride gets into it, and then you get arrogant and you think you have this huge amount of thing that you do no wrong, and it causes this huge issue and just causes destructive stuff that doesn't need to happen. We need to take this pride very serious. If we do not, it will affect many choices in your life. And these choices will change people's lives. Or better yet, it might affect God's plan because of that pride. And my spiritual father told me something, and I think I've said this before. In 5 years, do you want to look back and go, if I wasn't this prideful right then, things could have been different? Just, yeah. Proverbs 8:13, pride and arrogance, and that what of evil and perverted speech I hate. That's God speaking. That's God's way to live a good life. Pride can play tricks on you. It can make you stubborn. Pride usually shows its ugly head in conflict, like I said. Because, when you get in a conflict with somebody, and I used to say this as a police officer, when you get in a conflict, when there's two people in conflict, this is what happens. There's no benefit. Nothing goes anywhere because you're both on your high horse. So if one just lets down that wall and just goes, and usually it's the one that's being corrected or being rebuked, that they're so afraid by them admitting that they're wrong or looking at the behavior and actually analyzing the behavior that it's going to show that they're weak. And back to a sermon a couple weeks ago about being humble doesn't mean you're weak. Being humble going, okay, I can see how that might affect you. Doesn't make you weak. I think it makes you a stronger person. But you have to make certain, and I'm kind of going on a rabbit trail here, you have to make certain when you do that correction that you do it out of love. That it's not out of meanness, it's not out of spite, it's not out of the flesh, it's out of love. And sometimes it stings, and sometimes it hurts, and sometimes it's painful to look at that behavior. Now, and I kind of jumped ahead on my notes a little bit, so I apologize. And, people take that as a personal attack, and that's where that pride comes in. Because you're being defensive and you're being attacked, and so your pride comes up because I don't want to admit that I'm wrong. I can do this all on my own. Plus, with pride, you're relying on yourself for everything. So if you have such a handle on life, where does the Lord fit in with that? Because you can do it all. You do no wrong. You can handle everything. You can heal yourself. You can take care of everything. Where does that leave space for the Lord? And speaking of a personal thing that's going on in my life right now, like I said, there was a time in my life that I corrected people and was mean about it. And was very prideful about it. And was very prideful when people would correct me. And it didn't get me very far. It left me pretty sad and pretty unhappy. And I'm learning, slowly maybe, that you can correct people and correct people with love. And I'm learning it with my children that, I can still correct them and, do I want to correct them and lift them up, or do I want to correct them and beat them down? And maybe that's something I need to work on. Maybe there's a better way that I could do that. And I need to work on that, and I will continue to work on that. Psalms 10:4, in his pride the wicked does not seek he in all his thoughts. There is no room for God. Right there. States it in the Bible. With pride, you become wicked because you become mean and nasty and just mean and hurtful. And there's no benefit from it. There's really not. And once again, I'm not saying I'm perfect at all this. And I've said this before. Just because I do these sermons and I do these teachings, please do not think that I'm saying I'm perfect in any way, shape, or form. Because I'm not. And I learned something from each one of these sermons I do. And I see growth. And I see things that I look at in a different way. And will continue to look at in a different way. With everyone I do. But like I've said, that's why I need my relationship with Jesus. Because I am messed up. And I live in this fleshly world. And I live in this society where, by gosh, you better not correct anybody. You better not say anything to correct anybody on their behavior, their actions, any of it. Because that's just wrong. There was a time in my kids' school where, everybody got a trophy. Well, why? We didn't all win. My son, his soccer team made it to their age group finals. They didn't win. They didn't get a trophy because they didn't win. So everything's not all rosy and sweet like everybody thinks it is. And God will rebuke us, and He will give us corrections, and it's not always the nicest way in the world. It hurts sometimes, and it's painful sometimes, but there's a bigger lesson in it. And just because the Lord rebukes us or teaches us a lesson or helps us see something doesn't mean He's walking away from us. Because I'll tell you, in my own life, He never walked away from me. He's always been right behind me. I was just too stubborn or hard-headed to notice that He was still there, still cheering for me, and still rooting for me, and still loving me. Even though I thought at times, God, where are you now? Why this, why that? He was right there. He never left. Isaiah 2:17, human pride will be humbled and human arrogance will be brought down. Only the Lord will be exalted on that day of judgment. That pretty much says it. There's not much more to say to that. 2 Corinthians 12:10, for the sake of Christ, then I am content with weakness, insults, hardships, and persecutions. For when I am weak, then I am strong. So with that said, that I use that scripture at the end because I think that is a huge, big part of this sermon. That because of my love for Jesus and my acceptance of Jesus into my heart, there are times that I may be weak, and there are times that I may be insulted, and I may be put down and told I'm doing something or gave up on something. And that's okay, because I know how my Lord sees me. And there are times, very recently, that I get wrapped up in those insults and I get wrapped up in that fleshliness, in that fleshly life. And I insult back. And that's not right. And that's not a good way to go. And I need to work harder on that. And, I really think if we all stay humble and fight this pride thing, it would do amazing things in your marriage, in your relationships, in your friendships, in your job, with your kids. I'm dealing with something right now where I'm not trying to be prideful, and I'm not trying to be rude and mean and hateful. I'm just trying to make corrections and do them out of love. And I hope someday that is seen and heard and felt. And if it's not, I guess I got to leave it with God, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to leave it at His feet, and He will do with it what needs to be done. This was a pretty short one, but I think, it's pretty, it's that pride thing. And, I thank the Lord every day that He gave me a big throat to swallow my pride. And, sometimes there are times that my throat hurts more than others from swallowing it. But I'm going to continue to do it. And I'm going to continue to walk and continue to move forward. I hope this makes sense. It makes sense in my head, so I hope it makes sense to you. If it doesn't, if there's a part that doesn't make sense to you, please study it out. If there's something you have a question with, send a comment, do something. Let me know. I'm going to keep going forward. I thank you all for your support, and we'll go on and get out of here and wrap this one up, and we'll see you guys next week. Lord, I thank you. I thank you for the strength to step out on that limb like I do, sir. I thank you, Almighty Father, for the corrections you give to me and the spiritual leaders that you've given to me to rebuke and correct me, Lord. And I know they do it out of love. And Lord, I just ask that the ones that I love and care for, that I rebuke and correct, to let them know in their heart that I do it out of love. It's not out of meanness or pridefulness or anything. It's out of love, Lord. I thank you and ask you to bless and protect everyone who's watching and listening. And in your name we pray, Lord. We give you all the honor and glory. Almighty Father. Amen. Thank you.